So low stress subtraction is pretty closely related to our standard renaming algorithm or borrowing algorithm. Let's suppose we have this subtraction to do right there. So right away we realize we have to do a borrow. So what we do is we rewrite this where we leave a row in between the two numbers. So 3,201. And then to fill that row, I put in a box. And then we're going to do some renaming. And this is supposed to help deal with the kind of the messiness that happens when I do the regular borrow. So I'm going to set up the low stress, compare it to the regular borrow just to compare the two. So then anytime I realize I can't do a subtraction, I'm going to have to adjust, and I have to look over to see how to adjust. So we need to borrow, but there's nothing to borrow from here. So we have to jump way over to here and realize we also have to borrow there. So we're just kind of thinking through. We need to borrow, borrow, borrow. We got to go all the way over to the 3 to get this thing going. So we're going to drop that 3. So there's no crossing out up there. Just right underneath, we're going to drop that 3 to a 2. And we know we're going to have to come over here to the where we're making that a 12, but it's going to have to loan over to here. So I'm going to make that an 11. And that would normally become a 10, but we're going to have to loan over to here so the 1 can borrow. So that's going to be a 9, and then that's going to be an 11. And sometimes it takes some scratch work to get that set up or off to the side. And so sometimes I might have kids right off to the side, the 3201, and start thinking about that. They were going to maybe scratch that 3 and put a 2. That would make that a 12. But then they realize, oh, that's got to be scratched to an 11 to make this a 10. Oops, but that's got to be scratched to make a 9 to make that an 11. Then we can just take that messiness and bring it over here nice and clean. So we got a nice orderly way to go about this. And if there's any doubt about that, we can always expand it to see that it matches what's above. And I don't always go over that with the younger kids, but sometimes it's worth the time to see if they understand what each place means, because sometimes they don't recognize that as 200. It's just a 2. And so we might remind them this expanded form versus that one. So I'll do that in a moment too, because we haven't talked about expanded form for a while. Once I get that set up, then it's just a matter of subtracting each column. So then I have 11 minus 5 gives me 6, and 9 minus 4 is going to give me a 5. 11 minus 3 is going to give me an 8, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. So we just try to neaten up what happens here so we just have a cleaner interface for the student. As opposed to the kind of messiness that can sometimes happen here where, I want to borrow, but I can't. I want to borrow, okay, so I can do it here. I'm not thinking ahead. I would just scratch that, make it a 1, borrow over to there, but then we have to scratch that, make it a 9, and then put the 11 there. Right? And then we continue 11 minus 5, because that was our main goal. So 11 minus 5 is 6, so 9 minus 4, I can do that. That's good. That's a 5. But then I get 1 minus 3, and so I got to start doing some more messing around. And then I can do the 11 minus 3 to get my 8, and finally 2 minus 1 is 1. So some kids have a hard time organizing that up there, so we try to get them to play around, neaten it up, and then continue. And some kids find that calming, and it gets them centered to get that done. Double check this as far as expansion of numbers go. So it's kind of a side note here on expanded form of numbers. The original number was 3 thousands and 2 hundreds and no tens and 1 1. And we know that is going to give us that 3,201. We're just identifying clearly the place values. The new version, we just renamed 3,000 to be 2,000s and 11 hundreds. Oops. And 9 tens and 11 ones. And if we continue to clean up that expanded form of the second version, we're going to have 2,000, 1,100, 90, and 11. And adding them up, we should get back to where we started. So we have a 1, 9, 10, carry the 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 1 is 3. Right? So we can show that they match. We just renamed this number in that low stress box there. All right. Oops, didn't mean to stop share there.